Ultra Healthy Video Game Nerd here, and this is Pickups video number 4. We have come a long ways. Today I've got a lot of stuff to introduce to you guys, some really interesting games. It looks like I'm buying tons and tons of games, but the truth is these are a lot cheaper than the things I had been getting kind of over the past year, so I'm not spending like outrageous amounts of money the way it might look. For the most part, most of these things are not extremely expensive. A lot of games to get through today, so let's get straight to it. We're going to start off with the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx 16, okay? First of all, I did get JJ and Jeff. This is called Kato-chan Ken-chan. In Japan, it was based on a real-life comic duo. So these were actually real people. And they changed the character graphics a bit for the American version. This is the Japanese one. Finally got a nice one of that in the box. I have no idea why, but it's almost impossible to find one with a clean instruction booklet that isn't totally screwed up. This one's really nice. Next, big hitter here, Ki-dan 00. This is an awesome shooter that not as many people know about as things like Spriggan or Lords of Thunder. It is by Telenet, right, which might make you wonder for a minute if it's going to be any good, but actually after a few plays you realize it is totally awesome. I really want to talk more about this one. Thinking about doing a full-length review video of this. Next up, Travel Epuru. This is a peculiar Bomberman clone, you could say in a way, but actually they're all one-on-one versus battles. The levels, it's just you versus a computer opponent, and you try to bomb each other, and it's not set up in grids the way that Bomberman is. It's kind of just more open space, and you can just pick up items at randomly and toss them. It seems cheaply done, but it's extremely fun. I really ended up actually enjoying this a lot, and it has probably the most nonsensical storyline I've ever seen. You know, a lot of PC Engine CD games, they have those cutscenes, and it's just completely absurd and disjointed. But that's part of the beauty. Next, Cho Aniki. Yes, it is the second game in the Cho Aniki series. We often called them the gay shooters, lovingly. And this one is barely a shooter. It looks like a side view shooter, but really most of your attacks are done with almost like Street Fighter moves, kind of like Hadoken style button presses. And like Masaya's other PC Engine CD games, the gameplay is kind of just okay. It's not bad, it's not extraordinary, but the presentation, the music, everything is just so wild that I feel like it's really worth having. Next up, another big hitter here, Mystic Formula. This is an overhead view 2D run and gun, kind of like Heavy Barrel. It's in that genre, or Pocky and Rocky. But this is for the PC Engine CD. As always, they focused a lot on the cutscenes and the voice acting, but the actual gameplay is really cool. Also, very badass music by T's Music. And so this has become slightly more expensive over the years, but I did secure a very nice copy of this. Next up, people are going to be wondering why in God's name I didn't already have this. This is Gate of Thunder. Now, I actually owned this before and let it go. And the reason why I let it go originally was because I felt kind of like it was a little too easy on normal mode, and then a little just kind of thoughtlessly ridiculous on a hard mode. But kind of going back to it, I was very, very hasty way back when. So I got this back, and I'm really, really glad I did. I thought I had heard that this was worked on basically a lot of the people from Technosoft. It's like Thunder Force 3 Gaiden, basically. It's extremely similar, and it's really, really cool. This is a very good shooter. Stands alongside, Winds of Thunder. Stylistically different, but, they're both by Red Company. Very good. Next up, the Metamor Jupiter. This is a peculiar 2D side view shooter on the PC Engine CD. Doesn't get a whole lot of name recognition. The music is by this really famous guy, Matsura Masaya from SciS. And he might have even done some other really famous game music. I can't think of it at the moment, but I mean, this was a big production. There was like a huge budget involved, obviously. There's like, the graphical effects are crazy. Lots of, in between cutscenes. The game itself is good. You know what I'm saying? It might not be as good as the Thunder Force series, but it is pretty well done. You can like turn around at will. There's weapons to switch between. Really cool game. Here we go. And more shooters on the PC Engine CD. Next we have Terraforming. This is a Japanese developed game, but the graphics were done and conceptualized by Sid Mead, a kind of sci-fi producer artist. This is a person I actually don't know a whole lot about, but you can see that the graphical style is quite different and really truly has its own individual style. So I guess this is the kind of stuff that he draws. And the game itself is fast-paced. It's relatively simple, but it's quick, keeps you on your feet. Some really good music. Finally got Terraforming. More shooters on the PC Engine CD. It is Legion. One of the worst shooters known to man. It is a very bad game. I actually got this because it was one of the first 3 PC Engine CD games that I got when I was in college. I ordered a PC Engine and I got it with 3 games. Legion, Browning, and Avenger. And 2 of them turned out to be god-awful. Legion and Browning, horrible. Avenger is actually a pretty good shooter. But the music is out of this world. I got them mainly because they were by Telenet, and I knew I loved their music from Valis and the Wolf Team games on the Sega Genesis. And this one also has really good music. The game, it plays like a demo. It's all screwed up. I can barely enjoy it. You know what I'm saying? But I just feel like it's such an important part of my gaming history that I wanted to have it, so I got it again. It's dirt cheap. Next up is Chris's Adventure. This is a game named after me, actually, but it turns out that the Chris in this game is a girl. Chris is your main character. This is a 2D platformer on the PC Engine CD. Not a really talked about game, not very expensive, and I can't understand why. There are not a whole lot of 2D shooters on the PC Engine CD, and this is one of the better ones, actually. This is a well-made game. The levels are not extremely long, but there's 8 worlds with 2 levels each, and some of the music is really great. Apparently, some of the guitar work was done by Namiki Koichi, who is Sega's central guitarist for SST Band, which is really a trip. And the game itself plays pretty damn nice. So, totally glad to have this. Now some simple stuff. Valis 3. I had the American version, but I got the Japanese version just because it was so cheap with the spine, and I'm such a huge Valis fan. I want to have all the versions, if possible, someday. So, got this back. Doesn't cost a lot. And in similar vein, I got Exile PC Engine CD. I already have the American version. I kept my English Exile when I came over here, but this was like $5 with a spine card. It's excellent condition, and it's not as good as something like Zelda, but it's odd. It just has a very unique atmosphere and kind of storyline, and the music is great. So this is actually a really important game to me, so had to get that. $5. Right. That is PC Engine finally done. So now we're going to get onto the PlayStation. Another game with a ton of amazing sleeper hits in Japan. First of all, some weird stuff here. This game is called Yakiniku Buyo. Yakiniku is basically Japanese barbecue grill restaurants, and Buyo basically means master. So this one takes a little bit of explanation. When you go to a yakiniku restaurant, a kind of grilled beef restaurant in Japan, you have a grill at your table, and you cook your own food. They bring it out to you, kind of thin sliced beef or vegetables, and then you stick them on there. You have tongs, and you flip them over, and you eat them as soon as they're done. So this game has made a puzzle action game out of it. And it's exactly the same as going to yakiniku in real life. There's a grill, you put down the different types of meat or vegetables on it, flip them over. As soon as they're done, there's customers at the top of the screen that you toss them out to and give them to the people who want them. Peculiar idea, works really well, and multiplayer, the 2-player versus mode, is so hectic and fun. I am going to do real proper review video about this game and the kind of spin-offs. This game was made by the same company that did games I've already done reviews on, of Korokoro Postonin and Qin. This company called Media Entertainment. They did some really weird stuff. So this is a trip. And it was probably their best-selling game because there are spin-offs, and I did get a couple of them also. This one is called Nabe Kazoku. Nabe is hot pot. And it's a kind of similar idea where you have the nabe on screen and there's all different kinds of food in it, but instead of giving it to customers, you yourself are trying to eat it as soon as it gets done. And this is a versus puzzle game. So you're always playing against somebody, either the computer or another person. And again, really hectic to play 2-player. And there was actually a proper sequel to Yakiniku Buyo on the PlayStation 2. It's called Yakiniku Buyo Bonfire. So I got that. These are all so cheap. I mean, hardly anybody knows about them, and I guess they're just common, or they're not as desirable as action games. So did also get the sequel. It's extremely similar. It's almost exactly the same, except they added a few new types of food that you put on the grill. And still more for PlayStation 1, I finally found Landmaker. So this is technically a port of an arcade game, but actually there's 2 completely different games in the disc. This is also PlayStation 1. It was dirt cheap, $3 with Spine Card. This was a puzzle game by Taito in the arcade. Again, it's a versus puzzle game where you kind of throw pieces up into the field and you build land masses, which is why it's called Landmaker. So it's super fast-paced, really easy to comprehend the basics of, but, like a lot of puzzle games, to really become a master of it and move quickly is quite difficult. And it's sort of strange, the marketing plan that they chose, because they put a second game in the PlayStation version. It's a totally different game. It's actually a standalone 1-player puzzle game where it's the exact same concept, where you can shoot pieces up into the screen and build land masses, but it's single player and they give you actual real puzzles. So there's already some pieces there to begin with, and for each level you need to complete some kind of task. There's a quota. Basically, you have to build a certain size land mass in the levels, and it's totally addicting. It's a really good idea. The only strange thing is the cover art is so bland because they've based it on the original 1-player PlayStation mode, whereas the arcade mode has this really cool stylistic 2D graphics that are totally colorful. They really should have put that on the cover. Probably would have sold a whole lot more copies. But as it is, you look at it and it just looks so boring. But this is awesome. It's like 2 great games in one. Next, this is probably the most expensive game here. Actually, this is the Gegege no Kitaro game for the PlayStation 1. If you're not acquainted with this series, it was a comic book and then it became an anime later on. And it's all about kind of Japanese ghouls. It's become a very central kind of standard go-to anime if you want to know about Japanese demons. So it's all about them. It's not like scary or anything, it's kind of for kids. But there were a few games based on this series, and Konami handled most of them, or maybe even all of them. So this was a really late PlayStation 1 game. It was from 2003. It is a 2D side view action kind of platformer. It's mostly a boss rush. Actually, the platforming scenes are few and very short. So it's mostly just about, again, because the series focused so much on Japanese demons, it's about fighting the demons as bosses. And you can tell the control is really similar to another Konami PlayStation 1 game Cyborg Kuro-chan that I reviewed very early on in my channel. It is developed by the same person. But I just got this. I can't really say a whole lot about it, but I beat the first 2 bosses and it seems pretty cool so far. And the last game for the PlayStation, I finally picked up this weird shooter called Tsutenkaku. This is an early PlayStation 1 game from '95, made by a company no one ever heard of. It was probably just a one-shot game from this company, but it is completely 2D. Graphics are all 2D. It's 5 levels, and it's just weird, but it is actually pretty playable. It's a lot more fun than I was expecting. It's so cheap, and it gets so little respect. I just figured it must be god-awful, but it was about time, so I picked it up and tried it out. And it is pretty damn fun to play. I can think of a lot of shooters that are not as good. So we've finally gotten through PlayStation. So I also got a few games for the Famicom or the Nintendo. First of all, when I went home to America, I had actually asked my family to pick me up a couple games from eBay. So first of all, this is the English version of Powerblade 1. For those who don't know, this game was completely reworked for the American version. So it's a totally different game. Essentially, level designs are different, your main character design is different, the weapon power-ups are different. You can shoot in 8 directions in this, whereas in the Japanese version you can only shoot straight forward. The Japanese version is way harder, but I finally got a boxed version of the American one. It is an excellent game. It's a really important game for the Nintendo. And I also did get Simon's Quest Castlevania 2. Now, this game in Japan was only released for the disc system. It was not a cartridge in Japan, and the disc system is a bit of a pain in the ass to get a working one. And even if you do, the discs have load time, so the cartridges are much more desirable if possible. So I did get an original of the American Simon's Quest. So I mean, opinions are so split on this game. I love it. It's such a beautiful memory. I love this game to death. It has some of the greatest atmosphere of any video game I've ever played. I actually got, when I was going to bring them back, I figured, they're going to get damaged easily. So I got plastic covers, and the least number we could get was a set of 10. So now I've got almost all my American Nintendo games covered with plastic boxes, which is cool. And I did actually get a couple Japanese Famicom games since the last pickups video. I finally got Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. There are very few side-scrolling beat-em-up games that I really love, and this is one of them. Although the Nintendo version barely even plays like a beat-em-up, really, because you have the special move that you can do when you press both buttons together at once, and it kills the enemies with one hit. So basically, the entire game is just kind of trying to get that to connect consistently. So it barely even plays like a beat-em-up, but I love it. And just arrived yesterday is Mega Man 6. So I now have Mega Man 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on Famicom boxed. This is the one I've played the least. I probably played it for all of 10 or 15 minutes, 15 years ago. So it's the one I know the least about, but I definitely wanted to get it. This is one of the more expensive Mega Man games in Japan. It generally goes for at least 80, maybe 90. I've seen it go over 100 with a good box. This is a beautiful, beautiful, perfect box. And for some reason, this person put it up, buy it now for 45. And I must have been one of the first people to see it. So I got it for 45. It was kind of a risk. The person didn't have a perfect score. So I took the risk, and I'm extremely glad I did. I got one new Sega Genesis game, or Sega Mega Drive game, that is High Seas Havoc. It is called Captain Lang in Japan. Great platformer by Data East. Doesn't play like their other games. They must have got a different group of programmers to come and make this one. This is an excellent game, really colorful. Some people might think it's a Sonic ripoff when you first see it. It's not really fast-paced like that and doesn't have a whole bunch of different pathways you can take. It is just a straightforward platformer. Extremely hard. It's super hard. From World 4, each world has two levels, and from World 4 it just gets maddening. There's just these moving platforms. It's crazy. But it is extremely well made. It's very consistent. Controls really good. Really beautiful creation. Also have just a few Super Famicom games, Super Nintendo games. So some really interesting stuff. Finally got a Mystical Ninja game for the Super Nintendo. I had none of them. So this is 2. In America, there were only 1 Mystical Ninja game went to America. It was the very first one. In Japan, there are 4. And this is the second one. My friend told me recently this is the first one where the robot comes in. Where, what's the goddamn robot's name? Impact! This is the first one where you have the Impact battles. And they are a little annoying as usual, but it's, this is the meat and potatoes of the Mystical Ninja series. Really, really cool. Next up. This is not something I had expected to get, but upon looking at the videos, I decided I should try it. This is the Macross shooter for the Super Famicom. Now, I had seen the Macross games on the Sega Saturn, and I was like, these are garbage. And they are. They're trash. And that's why they're so cheap. This, surprisingly, is a competent shooter. This is actually a really good shooter. You have 3 ships that you can choose from. They all have 3 weapons each that you can switch between at will. They're all totally different. None of them are like really overpowered. So you really have to choose carefully, kind of. And it is a really well made game as far as the entire presentation, like the graphics and the music. There's like hardly any slowdown with these huge things moving on screen. It's really well done. It's outrageously hard. It is extraordinarily difficult. This is a very, very hard shooter. Harder than Axelay. Way harder than Axelay. I couldn't beat it. I actually got really close to the last boss. I got to level 6. And it's like, it's in outer space and it has this like super like large scale atmosphere to it. And you're like, this has got to be the last level. And the boss is crazy hard. Finally beat it. It wasn't the last level. There's level 7. That was the last level I checked. But yeah, if you think you're tough, play Macross. And Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, UN Squadron. It's called Area 88 in Japan. It's based on a kind of obscure anime. I watched the movie once. Maybe it even started out as comic books. This was one of the first Super Nintendo games I ever bought when I was a child. It was probably like the 3rd. We probably had Mario, F-Zero, and then this. I went to the store. I remember it was in just the shopping mall. It might have even just been like a kiosk where they were selling games. And the guy was like, oh, I think there's a game you might like. I can't remember if I was talking about shooters or something. And he turned this on and I played the first level or something and saw the demo and was like, must have. So I ended up getting UN Squadron really early on, and what a great memory because it's an excellent, excellent shooter. It's not very expensive. This was $30 shipped, and the box is like superb. It's like really, really nice. That is just about everything as far as the new games I've gotten, but I did also get a couple game soundtracks, so I'm just going to introduce those really quick. First of all, this one is called The Fallen Angels. It's, what's the Japanese? Tsuiraku Tenshi or Daraku Tenshi? Can't remember. The Fallen Angels, this is a fighting game made by Saikyo. People who play a lot of arcade games probably know Saikyo as the developer of shooters. They made Gunbird, Zero Gunner. I don't care for their shooters all that much, to be completely honest. They annoyed the shit out of me. Except for a couple exceptions. Zero Gunner 2 is really, really great. But the music is usually badass. This is actually a person who left Capcom, who had done music for Capcom kind of early on, maybe in the early 90s. So pick this up, and these are really, really great. The sound driver is always very similar, so the sounds are kind of similar to Gunbird. and all of those. But the songs kick ass. You know, it's his style, but put into a fighting game. These are really good. One last thing here. This is a game soundtrack to Gallop Racer 2000. This is a horse racing game. But it's a racing game. It's not a simulation game. It's an actual racing game where you race the horse. Horse racing is a huge thing in Japan. Don't know if you guys know about that, but it's kind of legal gambling here, and some people are really deep into it. This is something I knew nothing about. It was an arcade game, and then it was ported to the PlayStation. Most of the music on here is from the PlayStation version, and then just the last few tracks are from the arcade versions. Now, how I ended up buying this is kind of funny. Somebody in my Twitter feed mentioned, does anybody know anything about this shooter, this soundtrack? There's no rips of it anywhere. There's very little information. If anyone knows anything about where you could get it or get rips of the music, let me know. So seeing that, I just did a real quick search on Yahoo Auctions Japan, which is where things usually are here, and there was an unopened copy for $16, basically 1,600 yen. It wasn't a buy it now. It was a regular auction. It was just a couple days left. So I talked to the guy. I was like, well, it's here. If no one else bids on it, I'll just buy it and rip them for you. So no one else bid on it. I was the only bidder. So I got it brand new for 1,600 yen. It's about $16. And now it is here in my hands. And the music is excellent. Actually, the music is really, really good. It's kind of breakbeat, synthy, jazzy kind of stuff, but it is really, really awesome video game music, and it's like 70 minutes of music. So that was just a really kind of random series of events that ended up in me getting an awesome game soundtrack for really cheap. That is everything. I've been talking fast because there was so much to get through. And I assure you, most of these are not particularly expensive. I have the luxury of living in Japan, so, you know, when I see things come up and I think they're a good deal or they might be underpriced slightly less than what the real market value is, you know, I go in and get them. So I've got all this crap, but don't let it fool you. I'm not rich. People are getting the wrong idea by seeing these pickups videos. They think I'm loaded with cash. It's not the case. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to know any more about any of these games in detail, let me know in the comments. I'll do what I can. Like I said, a couple of these things are so interesting that I want to talk more in detail about them. So I probably will end up doing full single video reviews of some of these games. But that is all for today. So thanks a lot for sticking around with me. And I hope you join me in the next video. See you.